All right. First up on our agenda is recognitions, and I'll turn it over to Andrea for Cheers for Peers.
Yes, just took a big drink of water to get ready for this.
Okay, good.
Okay, favorite time is when we get to talk about the wonderful staff that we have in the Hudson School District. And each month we select about 10, sometimes a couple more, to celebrate. And this, actually, we had such a fantastic response from the requests that we asked for back in October that we're using them for both November and December. So this is our December winners of the Cheers for Peers. So first up, we have Tyler Hunter. He's a special ed teacher at the high school and has been with the district for 2 years. He was nominated by Summers Vinegar. Tyler is an incredible asset to the SPED team, here as well as to the district. The relationships he is able to form with students are incredible. He can make anyone feel welcome with his bubbly personality and smile. He is able to make any student feel safe and comfortable with us, even when they don't trust anyone else. Being able to work alongside him and watch how he works with students and staff alike is amazing. Next up is Ann Kelslow. She is a special ed para at the middle school and has been with the district for 11 years, and she was nominated by Paula Monaco. She does amazing work with our students. She cares deeply and is intuitive of their needs. I'm grateful for her every day for all that she does for our students. She is fabulous. And then we have Kristen Matheson. She's a math teacher at the high school and has worked for the district for 14 years, and she was nominated by Susie Robley. Kristen goes above and beyond to help her colleagues in the math department. She is always around to support us and work with us when we need her. Kristen has also been a mentor to new math teachers every year. Kristen is a big part of why I want to come to teach here every day. She is a part of the TSS team. She is co-teaching 2 classes this year. She has over 40 504 and IEP students assigned to her and still has time to create lessons that get the kids moving and motivated. Then we have Megan Doherty. She is a special ed teacher at the high school and has worked for the district for 7 years. She was nominated by a new teacher, Amber Hargesheimer. Megan is someone who always says yes and piles so much on her plate. But what I appreciate about her is she's still willing to help out another coworker whenever she can. Students truly feel like her room is a safe space and is welcome to all students who are lucky enough to get to know her. She's one of the most patient people I have ever met and has such a big heart. Megan makes connections with students who sometimes have a harder time finding an adult who they can trust. I think it's important to recognize those employees who go above and beyond simply because they love what they do. Sam Peterson, another special ed teacher, and she is at the middle school and has worked for the district for 13 years, and she was nominated by a coworker. When it says coworker, that we give staff the option of being anonymous if they so choose. So that's why we don't designate it here. So Sam leads alongside her teachers. She is building the capacity of teachers to increase student achievement and results. She genuinely wants education to be a desired field to work in and wants to problem solve this broken system of education. She leads by example and provides a listening ear when frustrations or problems arise. She provides time for collaboration and problem solving and advocates to administration the needs that are necessary for teachers to do their jobs well. She also advocates for students and supports them in all aspects of life. Then we have Julia Miller. She is a PE teacher at the Hudson building and has worked for the district for 7 years, and she was also nominated by a coworker. Julia has gone above and beyond to make me feel welcome and appreciated at Hudson. She's an amazing educator who creates very unique and engaging experiences for her students. Every school deserves a Julia. Love that. Then we have Cheryl Klanderman. She's a first grade teacher at Prairie and has worked for the district for 21 years. She was nominated by Jody Youngman. Cheryl is the most patient, loving teacher I have ever met. She meets every student where they are and shows them how much she cares about them every single day. HP is lucky to have her and be inspired by her. In addition to being an amazing teacher, she helps lead the Sunshine Committee, coming up with new and fun ways to celebrate each other. Then we have Jen McConnell. She is a first grade teacher at North Hudson and has worked for the district for 2 years. She was nominated by Robin Rivard and another coworker. I have been lucky enough to have been able to observe Jen in action. She is amazing. Jen teaches acceptance, independence, and self-determination skills through all of her lessons. Students know exactly what their expectations are and are supported in reaching their fullest potential. Jen is an extremely talented educator. She brings a wealth of knowledge and skills that positively impact students and staff every day. Jen is a leader. She has a gift for seeing the whole child. Jen has high expectations for all of her students and personalizes instruction consistently to help students achieve their goals. Jen's students feel loved, cared for, and believed in. Jen is an asset to the Hudson School District. Then we have Leah Walbert. She's a kindergarten teacher at Willow and has worked in the district for 19 years, and she was nominated by Jenna Weiland. Leah always has a positive attitude and the desire to give more to those around her, both her students and her colleagues. She has spent endless amounts of time supporting kindergarten teachers around the district with all of the new exciting things we are doing in our K classrooms. I'm getting out of breath, sorry. Big breath. For example, she willingly offered to be videotaped singing the letter song that has been used daily across all of our K classes in the district, and even at home with kids and their families. Her willingness to always help out and put others before her are what make Leah that amazing person, teacher, and colleague she is. Then we have Adam Wirt. He is a third grade teacher at EP Rock and has worked for the district for 15 years, and he was nominated by Michelle Beer. Adam has been a great teammate. He's full of knowledge and understanding of what third graders need. He's a kind ear when needed and helps me answer all of my rock questions. Adam knows what it takes to be a great teacher and shares his knowledge with his team. The last two are kind of a duo, Rachel Miller and Kate Barch. Kind of combine the two because there's a whole long paragraph that applies to both. So first of all, Rachel is a third grade teacher at Rivercrest and has worked for the district for 32 years. Rachel was nominated by Crystal Braley and a coworker. Rachel's fantastic at what she does. The third grade classrooms are so large and she makes time for all of her students. And Kate Barch is also a third grade. It's her counterpart to Rachel. Kate's a third grade teacher at Rivercrest and has worked for the district for 19 years. She was nominated by Veronica Guzman and a coworker. Kate puts her heart and soul into her teaching. She has risen to the challenge of a large class this year. She puts in extra hours making sure her students receive the best education. Kate's planning and preparation skills are like no other. She's dedicated and a team player. Then we have the combo nomination of Rachel and Kate, that they have entered the school year facing the challenge of large class sizes, and they are a dynamic duo. From day one, they have exhibited positive thinking and maintained a student-centered focus. Their ability to work together in the interests of their students is quite amazing and sets an example for those around them. Any student in these two classes is lucky to be under the helm of their loving care, careful, considerate, and creative planning, and within their fun-loving environment that they create day in and day out. They are rock stars. Oofda. So that's all of them. I know I read it really fast, but I just want, hopefully everybody takes some extra time to also celebrate these individual teachers each month, because it's exciting to take that moment to pause and celebrate the excellence that exists in our buildings on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for the report, Andrea. Any board members want to comment further on that? Otherwise, we just appreciate the report and like the recognition that these people who go above and beyond get recognized. All right, next up we have citizens' request to speak about non-action items, and we have one request, and that's Jessica Reeves. And she's from Red Brick Road and has a 7 mindset follow-up comment. Go ahead.
Good evening. Sorry, that's loud. I'm Jessica. I sent the board members an email on Friday. I'm just here to follow up with that about that email. I sent another one today. I've been asking the same question for 13 months. Feeling a little frustrated, a little put out, pushed to the side. I don't feel like what I'm asking is that difficult. I asked Tara for her assistance, and unfortunately she has not been very helpful. I've reached out directly to 7 Mindset. They told me they were happy to help, coming up with examples, definitions, until suddenly they had spoken to Tara, and she had indicated that we had spoken and I had asked my questions and they had been answered, and they have not been answered. I'm asking the board members to ask Nick, Tara, to follow through on this. Okay, because someone knows the answers. Subject matter experts. You're in the field of educating. I'm asking the educators to be these subject matter experts, and if you don't know the answer, I do believe that you can get it. Please help me. Let's put this to bed. Let me move on. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next up, we have reports, and we had a report that was going to be given by Dave Grambo, but due to personal circumstance for Dave, he can't be here tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to Nick for the Teaching and Learning Family Engagement update.
Yep. All right, so Dave has been working and putting together a teaching and learning family engagement committee, and so Tim, I'll just, because I can't see what's behind me, I'll just say, go to the next slide, but, so really, it's, you know, we've been looking at this has been going on for a year now, about building meaningful partnerships between school and family. This is not a new definition, the board has seen this definition of family engagement, but about being intentional in our design with our staff to reach out to families and to build communication with families and keep open lines of communication. And so, not to read this to you word for word, I think everybody can read it themselves, but that was a big piece of what the Family Engagement Committee started off with, was coming up with what is a definition of what family engagement looks like, because I think everybody has kind of their own idea. Then you move on to the next slide, the 3 Ps of family engagement. As they look at it, they want it to be positive, they want it to be personal, and they want it to be proactive. And so really looking at our staff reaching out to families and having positive contacts with families about their children and what's going on in school. I know they set the goal of 2 positive contacts over the course of the school year for every child in the district. And that's something that staff have been working on, making sure they're reaching out, making sure it's personal. It's not just a form letter or form email, that it's specific to the kids, so that, you know, our parents understand that we are really working to try to engage them and understand what is going on with that lines of communication and keeping those things open, so that it is a true partnership. You know, as we look for what are the needs of our kids that we all are caring for. The committee's work this year has been developing tools and resources to make it easier for staff to engage families. So they've been doing some family engagement activities and some different nights that have been going on. And also looking at how can they improve the orientation and transition process for families that are moving into the district or new to the district, and also for those folks that are going from elementary to middle school to high school, what those transitions look like, and how they can continue to engage families that way. And then the last piece is to, you know, strengthen partnerships throughout that community as they want to make Hudson a best community in Wisconsin to raise a family. When they looked at that, they said, how are they going to look at that piece? They're really focusing this year on these 2 questions. What do we currently do that moves us into that reality? And then what can we do to align our family engagement mission to move us towards that reality? And as Dave talked about at previous meetings, it's not just about the 4K through 12 experience. It really is from birth until post-secondary. And we've done some of that work even with our connection with the school district and Success by 6 and some of those other different partnerships we've had moving forward, in addition to our engagement with child care providers and things along those lines, to really expand that beyond just what happens in our 4 walls. With that, and I know you may have more questions about the family engagement piece, but it is going strong. It is a committee made up of staff members, really looking for ways that we can continue to engage our families, or reach out to them. And we know that, you know, when we can build those communications and be on the front end, be more proactive, sometimes when you have to have those difficult conversations, you've already built that relationship, you've already had those conversations, it's a little easier to have those pieces or those conversations. So with that, what questions might the board have, knowing that I might have to get back to you or have Dave answer them if they're very specific about the committee? Yeah. What?
Thanks, Nick. I really like the proactive, positive, personal, proactive approach to having the first call you make to a family not be when there's something tough to talk about. I'm curious, how are we able to measure whether or not this is working, the impact of this?
Yep. And so I believe, you know, one of the measures we have is on the parent engagement survey that we do send out, and the student engagement survey that we send out annually. But I think also when we know that kids and families that are more engaged, we start to see better attendance with our students. We start to see our students have more success academically. And so all of those different measures, I know they're looking at. I'm not sure where their baseline data sits as far as when they, you know, pulled that data, but I know that's been the biggest piece, is looking at attendance, looking at student achievement, but then also looking at the feedback we're getting from our parent engagement surveys. as we look at it. And I think kind of that anecdotal information is also like attendance at events and things like that that we're hosting. Are we seeing improved attendance? Are we seeing more people with the opportunity to engage that way?
No, that's helpful. I think there might be folks who say, why are we putting resources into engaging families? We're here for our students. Why aren't we focusing on our students? And so it's helpful to understand that this, it sounds like, is actually a strategy that's helping us move the needle on some other very student-oriented metrics that we might have, like attendance, kind of not repeating behaviors that require parents to be called in, et cetera. So that helps kind of put that in context. Thank you.
We know when there's a strong family-school partnership, we tend to have more success with our kids. And so that's why this has been a big focus of teaching and learning. Again, it can be kind of nebulous to try to measure as we work through those things, but we know it's absolutely vital that we have a strong partnership between home and school. So, other questions?
Mr. President,
Yes, Rob.
I appreciate the question on metrics. From a timing perspective, Nick, we have the update this month. When will we have a follow-up update?
I will have to check with Dave and get back to you. I'm not 100%. Like I said, I just walked into this presentation about an hour and a half ago. So once I get an opportunity, Dave's kind of unable to be contacted right now, but once we get an opportunity to get back in the conversation, I'll be able to give you more of that information.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep.
All right, anything else more on this item? Otherwise, we'll move on to the reminder about the state education convention, and that's Nick's as well.
Yep. So just a reminder, the State Education Convention is coming up, it looks like in 36 days, 13 hours, and 39 minutes, apparently. It's so exciting. They have a countdown clock, almost like anything else. But board members, if you have not gotten back to Tim Miner to let him know if you are going to be attending, please do so. We have to register on Thursday for those that are going. And so please make sure, if you have not gotten back to him, please get back to him. The next one on the list is school board election dates coming up. Just want to remind everybody, both watching and at the table, December 23rd is the deadline for incumbents to file notice of non-candidacy. We did submit to the paper, it ran in November, the 2 seats that are open this year, or that are up for either re-election or open. And so that has been filed. January 3rd is the campaign registration statement and declaration of candidacy that must be filed. So essentially, the paperwork that has to be filed at the district office if somebody is going to run for the school board. And then a couple other dates. The February 21st date is primary election, if necessary. Primaries are triggered by having at least one more than twice the number of seats open candidates running. So since there are 2 seats open, that would mean any more than 4 people running for the school board would then trigger a primary election, with the primary election being February 21st, and the top 4 vote getters in the primary election then move on to the April spring election, which is April 4th, 2023. So just want to make sure we get those dates out there. Every year we make sure we get those dates out there. And then usually at the January meeting, what we usually announce, that's January, is it 9th, Tim? Is that our January meeting? We'll usually announce then who are the candidates that are running for school board at that meeting, and whether or not there'll be a primary for that as well. So if anybody's interested and has any questions about the district or what it's like to run for the board or more about the school board, more than happy to field those questions from the general public. I would always encourage the general public to reach out to board members if they want to know what it's like to be on the board, and they can reach out to board members and ask them that. But if there's school district specific questions and you want to reach out to the district office, more than happy to follow up and have those conversations. So I'll work through that. That's all I have on elections.
All right, any questions then about the convention or the election? All right, seeing none, then we will move on to action items, and always up first is the consent agenda. And I would look for a motion for approval of same with the dollars for expenditures as indicated in the materials.
Mr. President,
Rob?
Move approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $2,153,452.50.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. There's no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda and expenditures are approved.
Mr.
We do
President?
have, yes,
I
one.
was just gonna say.
one
just
retirement, I saw in
One
that personnel,
retirement,
yeah.
yes. So the deadline is the 15th of December, and we're approaching that. But so far, only one retirement, and it's Cheryl Clanderman, who was also just celebrated for Cheers for Peers. First grade teacher at Hudson Prairie, 21 years in the district, and we're excited about celebrating her this spring.
Very good. Thank you for that, and thank you to Cheryl for her work in the district, and look forward to, honoring her retirement. What is it, going to be late April, early May this year? Do we know
Good
yet?
question. We don't know that yet. We got to work around all those calendars between the middle school and high school. So my prediction is probably late April.
Okay, very good. All right, next up, we have school calendar for 23-24, and that's usually Dave's
Yep.
purview, so.
Yeah, so that's
Nick
normally
is the
Dave's as well.
stand-in Dave. All
Yeah,
right.
I am the stand-in Dave. So the school calendar is up there on the board. This is the same calendar that you saw during the work session. Dave works and puts together a group of staff and works through a calendar committee to come up with calendar recommendations. A couple things I want to touch base on. This school calendar has us starting on the 28th of the 29th of August, with some flexibility that we've been given related to summer school. And some of the things along those lines. It has, so our first day of school being the 29th, and our last day of school with students being the 30th of May, and teachers being done the 31st of May. So we're done before the end of May. Couple of things that he would want me to add in there, or at least address. We do have some no school days on the 20th of October and the 23rd of October. What we got from feedback in the past from parents is instead of having two back-to-back three-day weekends where it was Friday or Monday off, can you try to couple them so that if they are going to have to find childcare, or if they're going to want to go somewhere, they can turn it into a 4-day weekend? And so I know that's something we did this past year, so that we've stuck with that. In addition, similar to what we've done this year, where it's the day off before Thanksgiving, and then Thanksgiving and the Friday after. And then we move into winter break, where students' last day going into winter break is the 21st of December, which is a Thursday, and then staff have a professional development day on the 22nd, which is Friday. It tends to be a teacher work day that we have where they can get caught up and get everything that they need to get done prior to heading into the second half of the year. So that is in there. Where it gets a little bit different is in the second half of the year, looking into January. We did move, even though the end of the semester is not until, or the end of the semester and quarter is January 19th. We actually, because we usually have that day off, since it was the same week, we felt that instead we would move the day off to January 15th, which would coincide with Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so through feedback that we've gotten from folks, and so we're able to do that, and still make things work. Then you can see conferences in February. There's no comp day or day off after the February conferences, and that was in an effort to try to get out before the end of May. And so the committee, Dave said, committee met, and they thought that that was a good trade-off in order to get out a little bit earlier, so that if we did have that comp day or that day in February, what ends up happening is then the students' last day would be May 31st, and then staff would actually come back the following Monday. And so they preferred it to have it that way. So we honored that. You can see spring break is the second full week in March, which I think coincides with what we've been doing. We are in a better spot now than we used to be. We used to not be able to set the calendar until we had the ACT test dates from the state, but now that we do ACT online, we have a testing window instead of a testing day. And so that gives us a little bit more flexibility there. And, we're still running 178 student contact days as we have done in the past, and 192 staff contract days. as we have done in the past. So any questions about the 23-24 school calendar?
And as we have with past,
25th, so now you can start to plan, right? So there you go.
well, we haven't quite approved it yet. I
will
do
be.
need a motion. Yeah, yes.
That's fine.
All right, we have a motion from Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from Rob. Any further discussion then on the 23-24 school calendar year, approving all of these first dates of the year, last day of school, and all the days off and so forth? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving the calendar as recommended by the committee signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the committee recommendation for the calendar is approved. Next up, we have an agenda item, 5C, procedures for supporting gender nonconforming students, families, and staff. And we just received two more. All right, so now we are up to 14, and in the past, when we've had more than 5 speakers, there's, in our policy, there's the ability to have it shortened to 2 minutes and have 2 minutes max. I guess what we're going to do, I polled some of the board members, and I have deviated from that, I think, 2 times now in the 9 years that I've been president, and exercising that discretion to shorten it to 2. But we're willing to give folks up to 3 tonight. What we would ask, though, is topics do not, or subject items of discussion not get repeated. This is a topic that has been discussed by the public at, I think, all 3 of our meetings this year, September, October, and November. And we have heard some of the things more than once, some more than 10 times. And we have received a couple dozen emails that all the board members, I'm sure, have read. I know I've read them. So we do appreciate public input. We just want to try and be respectful of everyone's time and not be repetitive if we can. In addition, I failed to read this policy at the beginning, which I'm, got laminated for a purpose for me to have it at every meeting, and I didn't do that prior to the start of the meeting. But for those that haven't heard it before, I'm going to say it again. Public comment is for input only. It is not a question-answer session, a time for debate, or a dialogue session. Members of the school board will not respond directly to public comments that are made at this meeting. No specific action may be taken at this meeting in response to comments that are made or raised during the public comment. This obviously being an agenda item, there is expected to be the potential for action, though. It doesn't necessarily mean that there will be, but there may be. And there will be a presentation by the administration on this. So a district representative could follow up with you and your comments after. We're going to recognize 1 speaker at a time. Only those speakers who are recognized are permitted to speak. We've had pretty good conformity with that over the years, and we hope we can continue that tradition. Anyone who interferes with or interrupts speakers, the board of the proceedings will be directed to leave. And then we want to avoid personal attacks on any individual, including any other speaker during the public comment session. Those are not acceptable, as are obviously obscenities and profanity. Persistence in making such remarks will end the individual's opportunity to address the board and may result in the individual being directed to leave. Okay, with that introduction, then we will begin, and I'm just going to take them in the order that they're giving to me. And I will state your name and where you are from within the district, and then you will have 3 minutes. I do ask, is there another board member who has, a reliable phone anyway? Mine, sometimes the alarm goes off. Gary, you'll do it? All right, excellent. So first up is Sarah Makovic-Soli from Knollwood Drive.
I was here in November and I told you that I'm a mental health social worker of over 20 years. Neither of my children are gender diverse, and that I'm here because I see firsthand what happens when children are not supported in their identity. I want to be clear. This policy means that kids cannot be recognized for who they are at school without their parents' knowledge and permission, effectively outing them to possibly unsupportive or, worse yet, abusive parents. You are forcing some of these kids to make a terrible choice. Either continue being addressed as someone they are not, a risk to mental health, or be forced to put themselves in a situation risking their mental and/or physical health at home. We know that LGBTQIA+ kids are 4 times as likely to attempt suicide. We know that only 1 out of 3 trans and non-binary youth find their home to be gender affirming, putting them at great risk for suicide and leaving them vulnerable to abuse of various types by fearful and unsupportive parents. You are not serving our kids by acting on a policy that could lead to their abuse or suicide. You have the power and the responsibility to send the message that all kids are valued, safe, and accepted here. Having at least one accepting adult can reduce the suicide risk by a whopping 40%. You could provide that protective factor. So I'm left to wonder why you would willingly put a child in possible danger. Is it your job to serve this handful of parents, or is it your job to protect and respect all kids? Our job is not to shield our children from information and differences, to try to make them who we want them to be. That is not possible. That is a figment of fear, unfamiliarity, and ego. Our job is to wildly love the children we have, unabashedly, unreservedly, and unconditionally. We should err on the side of our queer kids rather than adult comfort. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Sarah Yakub from Lockwood Court.
President Johnson, I had actually checked both boxes with your permission. May I address both the unrelated agenda item and
Okay,
this?
you have 3 minutes.
Okay,
Go
I'll
ahead.
do it. Thank you for your service to the school board and to the community. As I understand it, a considerable amount of our money goes to Milwaukee private voucher schools every year. As I understand it from speaking to a finance person in another school district, the 2020 Joint Finance Committee voted to stop providing those numbers to school districts. So while there is a convoluted shared formula somewhere in the ether, it's very hard to share with voters, to share with community members how that money is calculated, how much Hudson schools are losing with our community schools on the chopping block. Parents have a right to know, and you all, being the school board members, have a responsibility to let the community know just how much money or how much of our tax dollars are going over to Milwaukee. That's something I talked about in a recent race for state assembly, and people had never heard it before. That's a derelict of duty. Moving on to item 5C, I believe we are turning our backs on children without supportive families. I hate to say this, and I haven't come in and weighed in on this for quite a while, but Hudson schools have a reputation for being mean and bullying that starts at the top. One example that comes to mind is when there were students who walked out for Black Lives Matter or for the murder of George Floyd, there were a number of students inside the school in the presence of staff on video camera, flipping them off, mocking them, and treating them poorly. What kind of culture do we have in our high school that students feel free to act this way in the presence of staff on camera with no shame, no fear that they themselves will get in trouble? I can't tell you how many people have come to me and shared with me their stories that in the presence of anti-Semitism or racism, the administrator has responded with, well, was that a joke? Are you just too thin-skinned? What are we doing? Why are we catering to the most small-minded, bigoted among us? And I'll leave it with, I see members of the school board, some of you have blonde hair but not blonde roots, some of you wear glasses. If we're gonna say, this is rooted in faith, God intended you to be blind, and you self-identify as someone who wants to see and wear glasses. God identified you as dark hair, but you self-identify as a blonde. What kind of society would it be if we run around saying, you're not who you are, you're fake, or we're going to call you something other than you self-identify? That's just cruel. How many children need to die in Hudson schools by suicide for us to knock this off. As a former DA, I can tell you there are not safe parents in this world, and to be blind to that and naive to that and to turn our backs on those students is cruel. We need to do better. We have a responsibility. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have, is it Yala Bear? Jayla. I wanted to say Jayla, but all right, Jayla Bear from Aspen Drive.
Jayla Beer.
Yeah, Bear. Yeah, go ahead.
Alrighty, so back in September I spoke and I stated, which, a couple of them added on about the whole suicide risk. When there is one supportive adult in a transgender student's lives, there is an up to 39 less chance of them attempting suicide. For non-binary student, that's 33%. When you take into account the hundreds of staff members in the school, you're effectively taking away that much extra support for them. By the fact that you say, oh, you can tell us how you identify, you can tell us what name you want to be called, but unless your parents say it's okay, we're just going to disregard that. That's just a steaming pile of horse dung, really. Sorry, I don't know if I'm really allowed to say that, but it's out. The fact that these students, if they feel comfortable to come to a teacher, or many teachers, you should accept that. You should say, we want to be a safe person for you. We see you. We want to call you by your name. We want to use your pronouns. And those parents that are against that, why pander to them? Those are the unsafe parents. Those are the type of parents that their kids are going to be terrified to come out to them because they've probably been hearing them say transphobic and homophobic statements their entire life. That's just crap. Do better. Hudson prides itself on being inclusive. That's not inclusive. That's going back 50 years saying, well, you can kind of be who you want to be, but just don't talk about it. So many more students these days and youth are coming out as identifying as being in the LGBTQI plus spectrum. It's not really because, oh, it's being advertised that much more. It's because it's being more accepted to talk about. It's because it's less of a stigma than there used to be. We need to proceed. We need to, as adults, accept them. We need to encourage that. We need to foster that. We don't need to be dampening them and hindering them.
Right, thank you for your comments. Next up, Nikki Miller of 7th Street.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I have a 3rd grader at North Hudson. Love the school district, love living here. Here first and foremost, this is my first time at a school board meeting, first and foremost to show my support for the transgender, gender non-binary, and gender non-conforming kids in our school district, kids who've grown up in the school district and maybe left, graduated out. I want them to feel a sense of belonging and like they are included here. That goes for my kiddo too. Wherever he ends up on the spectrum at any given point. And it sounds like there's a little bit of, obviously, it sounds like you've been hearing a lot from a lot of parents and a lot of information about the damages that not recognizing the gender identities of our youth can present to them, and their well-being and their ability to be their full selves within their schools as they're growing up. Whether it's a risk by non-supportive parents, and I can tell you my kiddo himself had, my co-parent came out in her 30s as a transgender woman. So, and her parents are incredibly supportive, probably would have been as a kid, but she just didn't feel that support and it took that long to come out. And so I think it's just, there's a lot of complexity to the topic, of course, and it's not always just about are the kids going to be safe in the schools. It's about are the kids also going to feel included in the schools. And so it sounds like there's some sort of legal hang up in terms of whether or not you all feel like you're absorbing some sort of legal risk or exposing yourselves to some legal risk in recognizing folks' gender identities. I think we can all recognize that the law is not black and white. How we interpret the law is not black and white. And I hope that you all will do the work to get to a yes on this and being able to support our students. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Again, my apologies if I mispronounced, but Julie Pritchett from Bridgewater Trail.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I can say that being in the world can be a really scary place, and that's as an adult. Think about what a student in our school district goes through if they don't have support at home, and school is the last place where they can find anyone, just one person, to see them and respect them and accept them for who they are. We have an opportunity to take this space and make it okay for these kids to grow up and be themselves. There is an immeasurable value in the ability to give someone the respect to see them and say, I accept you. Maybe you don't agree, maybe you don't encourage, but the ability to sit with a human being and say, I respect you, that gives a student in this school, their whole world can open up if they have just that one safe space where they can be accepted for who they are and grow into a confident and wonderful human being, whatever that looks like. And if we have that opportunity in this school district to offer that kind of support to our kids, I think we have to take that space and make it a safe one for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Talia from City of Hudson.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. I originally was going to come up here and speak about the Department of Public Instruction's guidance on keeping conversations confidential between a counselor and a student, but you all already know that, so I'm just going to state what I was originally going to come up here and say. As you can see on my shirt, it says, be careful who you hate. It could be someone you love. An involved parent does not need a policy to be such. When a child is safe, loved, accepted, and validated in their own home, an involved parent will not need a teacher or counselor to tell them what's going on with their child because their child will tell them themselves. The problem here is not that children feel safer with and trust their teachers more. The question we should be asking is, why do these children not feel safe with their own parents in their own home? These discriminatory, hateful policies will not make parents more involved. They will not improve standardized scores. They will not increase GPAs or even college admission rates. What it will do is remove the only safe space that many of these kids have to be accepted for who they are. I ask you, why would you intentionally remove a space that would be safe from any child? What purpose does this serve? This policy will not improve our kids' education. It will rob our kids of knowledge and endanger their lives. I'm not willing to trade truth or safety in our schools to satisfy the latest political agenda that uses our most vulnerable students as their sacrificial lambs in a culture war of their own creation. I speak today in support of our gender-diverse students' right to come out as who they are, if, when, and to whom they choose. I stand here today because someone listening or somebody watching may be closeted who needs to see that there's hope and give them a reason to live another day. What time remaining, I will stand in silence in remembrance of the trans and gender diverse humans who have lost their lives because they chose to live authentically. And for those who will be taking their life because they feel that they would be better off dead rather than trying to live with rejection, isolation, loneliness, bullying, and being targeted by politicians, activists, school districts, and their own parents pushing a gender-based discriminatory action under the guise of parental right. I want you to spend it knowing that during this time, we may very well lose another one of our beautiful gender-diverse children. And ask yourself, Was their life worth it? And what part are you choosing to play in their lives and possibly their death?
Thank you for your comment. Next up, Cy Houston from,
Do I have
Mr.
any-
President, she
Yes.
asked that we use the remainder of her time for reflection. I think we should honor that.
okay,
Thank you.
there's 10 seconds, all right? 3 seconds, okay. Well, we'll be quiet, I guess, for 10 seconds. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Next up, Cy Houston of Grandview Drive.
As with the others, I appreciate the chance to come and speak to you on this. I come to you as a very strong supporter of public education and as somebody who's been in Nick's seat. For over 2 decades, I served as superintendent in 3 states. I've been an assistant principal, high school principal. I've been teacher at the elementary level and at the middle school. And in my position as superintendent and assistant superintendent, I not only created policy, I initiated it and created it, wrote it, and then administered it. Now this feels a little backwards to me because Mr. Johnson, I think you said there was going to be an administrative presentation. I assume Nick or somebody is going to tell us, what the devil does that mean? Seriously, what is this going to mean when you implement? What's the day-to-day practice of this? But instead, you're going to have that presentation after we comment. I think you could have eliminated a lot of questions and comments had you presented it. So I'm going to talk about your policy. This policy, by the way, last month when I was here, was an administrative directive, as I understood it, told the principal, I assume principal, maybe it was Nick, told teachers and counselors, here's what you're going to do. You're going to report if a kid wants a different name or pronoun, you're going to report that to the school counselor, and the counselor then is obligated to report it to the parents. That was last month. Now we've got a written policy. And I don't know what happened in the meantime. And I think we should have known. But let's look at your policy. So it starts off, right now it's not board policy. It's an administrative practice. It's a recommendation to you from the superintendent as something we should do. Good policy solves a problem. And I would ask you, what is the problem? If you're trying to do, as it says in here, value all aspects of a student's identity as a large part of ensuring they feel safe, seen, and respected, what's the problem? You haven't been doing that now? I honestly don't understand it. So in here it says, counselors are going to work with students who want to use a different name. Now, you honored a teacher tonight by the name of Sam Pefferson. Is that correct? You don't have to respond. I'm sure it's correct. She appeared to be female.
Samantha Peterson.
Oh, but it said Sam. And you
Yeah,
called her
that's,
Sam.
yes, I did call her Sam, yeah.
So she came to school as a Samantha and wanted to be called a Sam. I'll bet this is Nicholas. And he came to school and wanted to be called Nick. Your policy ignores all that. It's only if a kid has a little curiosity about gender that you're going to put them under this
All right.
policy.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, one last comment. If you have looked at the DPI instructions about how to handle this stuff, in your comment that says, if a teacher or administrator says, is there anything I should know to make you feel more safe or welcome? That is not a pupil record, according to the law. That's a teacher information or bit of information, and it shall not, according to the law, be disclosed to parents. Teachers are not required to report that.
All right,
That's
thank
straight
you.
out of
Thank you
DPI.
for your comments. Next up, Deb Monacan from, Deb, you're up. Deb Monacan from 7th Street North.
The last time I came to see you, it was on masks, so. I know this is a difficult topic, and I want to commend you on especially the first paragraph, because I think that gives you the direction that you need for any circumstance, and that's that you are there to support a child so that they become the best person they can be. And if somebody shows discrimination to them, no matter who it is, that you take the same action and that the board responds in the same way to any things like that so that we can be an inclusive community and supportive. That said, I would caution you about rabbit holes. And for me, what that is that too many times people that either out of fear or bias are going to bring up things, flags that are going to come up like the books. The books are bad and we need to get rid of those books. The pronouns are bad and those things are going to take your energy away from what your primary intent is. I guess my second point to be made here is that I don't know what the legal course is on all of this, but I do have concerns that if I go to a counselor, that is private information and legally cannot be shared. I don't know how that stands with a minor, but I do think the same issues hold here, is that it is very hard, and I can speak from experience, to come out. And even if you have a loving family, it doesn't make it ever any easier. So I thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, I believe is it Will Jenkins? All right, from Cedar Drive North.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak up here today. I have 3 kids in the Hudson school system, and we appreciate what you guys do. I do appreciate that you guys have put effort into creating this program. However, I have pretty big concerns with how it's being administered, or how it's at least listed in this policy. To kind of expand on where I think Cy was going as well, is you're creating an exclusionary process based on a judgment of a child of how they appear, or how you think they should appear, or how they're listed in this, I'd assume Skyward system is what you're referring to as the student management system. My problem too is with that you will not engage in classroom or school-based practices that require all students to disclose preferred pronouns. You leave out preferred names in there, which is frustrating because that's part of the issue, is preferred names. So this process alone requires that someone place judgment on whether a child looks or acts as if they are a certain gender, and if that name does or doesn't match how they present. And I think that's a big problem because you're creating a discriminatory process. And it doesn't hurt a DING or non-conforming kid to just say what their preferred name is and their preferred pronouns. So why do we need to create an exclusionary process that is built on discriminating against kids that do have a preferred name or a preferred gender or preferred pronoun that does not match what's in Skyward? On top of that, I didn't see in Skyward where you can even put a preferred name in there. So would it be in place of their first, middle, or last name? Is there going to be any process built to fix that process within the student management system? So I'll be respectful of your time and your request to keep this short, but I'd also like to express my support for all the previous comments on the same topic, and that I won't reread the same stats or anything like that because you've already heard it, but I'd like to at least express my support for all those previous statements as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. I have an E-Fi from City of Hudson.
Hi, my name is Elliot, and I'm the actual living proof of a senior in high school who had to deal with this. So a week before I turned 18, this policy, I don't know if it's actually a policy, I don't know what to call it, to be quite frank. So I had to come out to my parents because I didn't want them to find out from my counselor the day that it was enacted, basically. So I just really want to say I'm really disappointed. Not you. It stole my coming out experience. That was supposed to be my thing. And that was just really mean of you guys, so there you go.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next up is Molly Siebert from Founders Green.
Hello, good evening. My name is Molly Siebert, and can you hear me okay? Should I step back? Too loud?
Yeah.
So I'm here as a mother of 3 children in the district. I have 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school. I'm also here as an educator. I've been in education for over 20 years. I was a teacher, high school teacher for 15 years. And I have a master's in education, a PhD in curriculum and instruction. I now work with pre-service teachers, in-service teachers. I do a lot of my research, writing, and the courses in which I teach are on cultivating inclusive schools and classrooms. And like someone said earlier, that very first paragraph, very promising, awesome. When I look at the third paragraph where it jumps into the policy in itself, very antithetical to research best practice in terms of supporting our students. And I'd love to ask you, who are you centering in these conversations? Whose needs are you truly prioritizing? Previous research about the harm that can be done with policies such as these have been put out there. So I really would like you to reconsider, think about who you're prioritizing, who you're centering, and are you truly creating a space in which students' identities are affirmed? And back to that family engagement, I'm just going to name 2. I'm also on that committee. And that definition that was named out there before in terms of engagement is named right in there, that you all value, that we as a district value not only inclusivity, but also equity and diversity. And so let's make sure that our policies align with the values in which we're putting out there. Thank you all so much for your service. I think we can all agree that all of us here are passionate for the well-being of young people in this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tamara Butler from 5th Street.
I spoke in November on my own behalf. Today I'm speaking on the behalf of 2 of my family members. First, my son's fiance, who is, they actually live on Fairway Drive and is working tonight here in Hudson. So they gave me a statement to make. So this is from Bree Long of Fairway Drive in Hudson. As a student that has already graduated from HHS in 2018, hearing now that trans and non-binary students are getting outed by a place that should be safe for them, outing kids who use different pronouns and or a different name than what was given to them at birth is wrong. I have 2 trans siblings in the school system right now. Outing kids can and will lead to more bullying and suicide. As a non-binary graduate, I cannot stand hearing outing those who identify differently than what you want. I do not want harm coming to my siblings or to other students. The second statement is from my daughter, Naomi Brazil of Hudson, who is currently studying abroad in Costa Rica and is watching the live stream. She says, affirming the gender identity of an individual is life-saving care backed up by decades of peer-reviewed research. And children and teens are individuals, not just extensions of their parents. The Hudson School District is where I learned to evaluate problems and make decisions based on facts backed by research. And that, while it is important to understand the perspectives of others, science does not bow to unfounded opinions. I was lucky that when I came out to my parents that I was accepted, but I know plenty of people who were not. I know people who kept their identities hidden throughout their adolescence just so their parents wouldn't turn them to the streets. And all it takes is a quick Google search to find teens who were murdered by family members for coming out, or teens who committed suicide because they were stuck living as a gender they were not. A change in pronouns or names is not something that puts a child at risk so much that a parent must be notified. In fact, acknowledging the pronouns of a student can save their life. I implore the school district to look at the peer-reviewed research which affirms that gender-affirming actions are to the benefit of the individual. Okay, that was from Naomi. I have just one additional thing to add, which is I have had multiple kids go through the Hudson High School and middle school. And if you're going to put a policy like this in place, you're going to need to hire more counselors. The counselors can't even handle the basic stuff. You don't have the staffing to make that policy work and be safe.
All right, thank you. Steve Fox from Hudson.
Hi, I'm Steve. Here to echo my support for everyone who's already spoken, so basically see above. Children trust adults, and we need to, it's our job as adults to have a stable and secure community where they can grow up with trust. And this policy here that's already written out doesn't sound like it. Feels more like pronoun police, and we don't need it. The decision to come out or even to question, and that's the big thing, is to question too. It's a personal decision. It's not up to anyone else to pull it out of them. It's not fair and it's not kind. Thanks.
Thank you. And last speaker on the search is River from City of Hudson.
Is it okay if I move this down? Sorry, I'm just
Yes.
short.
Yep.
So. Okay, so I believe I spoke in September based off of the rule being possibly implemented. And now that it's implemented, I'd like to share some personal experiences that I've had with the transphobia that goes on at school and with the to be honest, just transphobic policy that is being put in place. I came out in middle school, which wasn't the greatest experience, to be honest. I've already dealt with mental health from a very young age, and in middle school, that just added on because of the bullying I was experiencing. 8th grade came along, and trigger warning for people that deal with mental health, but I was hospitalized 3 times because of bullying based off my gender identity. And I was put in an intensive day program in 9th grade because of being bullied and dealing with traumatic events because of being trans. And with this rule being implemented, I can't help but think, oh God, how my mental health and how others' mental health is going to be since this is implemented, and how others are going to deal with this, because I already have a lot of friends that have transphobic households. So just proof that this affects mental health. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for your comments. All right. I want to thank everyone who came forward, talked about this issue, and also those people that have submitted written comments and emails on both sides of the issue that the board has received already. Appreciate those. And now at this time, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Ouellette.
Thanks, Jamie. So what you have in front of you is a memo that we've written because people have asked what has been the directive. Can somebody write down what the directive has been? Where is it at? And then what has been the kind of the history behind everything. So there were some questions early on in the year about asking every child as if what their preferred pronoun would be in school. We reached out to find out, as far as the legal ramifications, and really what ended up happening is the advice that we have gotten, which I shared with the board on September 26th, was that the advice was the district should basically refrain from doing that, from asking every child what their preferred pronouns are, But if the district is going to do that, that our legal counsel believes that it would then be considered a survey, which would then be covered by the Pupil Protection Rights Act, which is requiring us to then notify parents prior to asking those questions so that the parents have the opportunity to opt out. And, you know, that has been the advice that we've been given. So the advice was, instead, ask the question, is there anything I can, that I should know about you moving forward, or things that you want me to know about you, but not necessarily it's a survey. Because once things are a survey, and they are covered under the Pupil Protection Rights Act, parents do have a right to exempt their kids, even if their kids do not want to be exempted from the survey. We are required to do that. And so that was shared with the board on the 26th of September. Then there was follow-up discussion where the board had asked, you know, can we get some more clarifications with the attorney? And we went into closed session then on October 10th. And at that time, I shared with you, the attorney talked with the board, and I shared with you the direction or the directives that we had been giving the building level administrators at that time, which doesn't deviate from the memo that you have in front of you. So that has not changed. That has been the same message all the way through. Then on the 17th of October, our attorney met with our counselors, leadership team, and school social workers and instructional coaches to answer their questions and have a question and answer session but also give the perspective behind why the advice is what that's being given. And that has happened. Then on the 10th of November, Tara and Dave and I were invited over to the high school for an optional staff meeting where people were asked questions. Again, clarification on the directive, and we met with about 20 staff members, maybe 25 staff members, to answer their questions and provide direction on that. And then on the 14th of November, at the board meeting that was at the high school, we had a speaker that gave a recount of what our policy was, and I responded at that time during the public comment portion, again, reiterating what has been outlined in this memo. It hasn't, again, changed. And so this has been kind of the same thing all along, which is if kids want to, if a child comes to a staff member and says, I'd like to change my name, or I think I may be transgender, or whatever that may be, it doesn't automatically trigger the staff member automatically going to the counselor and the counselor automatically going to the parents. That has not been the advice that we've given. And if that message has been miscommunicated, we then wanted to make sure we put it in writing. What it is if a student comes to a staff member, we would expect the staff member then to say, I understand what you're saying. What I would like to do is I would like to have you talk with your counselor so that your counselor can work with you to talk with your parents, or to build the skills so that you can talk with your parents so that we can have this discussion and then we can make those changes. If the child never feels comfortable talking with their parents about it, there's not an obligation that the counselor calls home. There's not an obligation that the teachers.
Yeah.
And you cannot dispute it.
Well,
To address that,
ma'am,
punish him for
you've had your opportunity for speaking, okay? We just asked, we were respectful for everyone, listening to everyone. Everyone in the room was doing that. And I said before we started, there's not going to be interruption of the board, all right? So you have your idea of what the facts are, but, okay, well, Dr. Ouellette's trying to explain what the policy is, all right? Not what you think it is, all right?
So with that being said, that brings us to this current statement, which, again, we are trying to balance individual student needs with parental rights and trying to work through that. We absolutely, without a doubt, if if people are on board and parents want those changes, we will make those changes in the student information system. We will make those changes with staff. We will do those things. All we're saying is this is a big enough issue that we believe parents need to be a part of the decision-making process. And that's kind of where we're sitting. On a practicality standpoint, if people have more on the individual questions or practical questions, you know, Tara can answer those a little bit better than I can, but that's where this memo is, and that is our direction, so that it is not a automatic, if you do this happens. That is not our direction.
Okay. No, there's no dialogue with the board, the board here. All right, so even if it's quick, we're not going to start, because then the next person's going to have an even quicker question and so forth. We're not turning it into a dialogue. That's why, you know, you folks want to respond after this meeting is over, you're more than welcome to do that, all right? So with that explanation, is there questions of Dr. Ouellette?
I have some comments.
Okay, you have comments. Go ahead, Molly.
I lost my little microphone cover. I spent some time last week, and I cannot say that I'm an expert at all. I'm not. I don't have a child who is transgender, and I have to say, listening to the students who spoke, that was really heartbreaking. Heartbreaking because we don't want kids to be hurt by a policy that we have, whether it's a misunderstanding or it's an actual policy. And I have to say, when I've heard people coming or saying this has been going on, I've said, I haven't heard that. That wasn't our intent. So anyway, I spent some time in the past week looking at some of the guidelines and trying to understand a little bit better what it is, what are the guardrails for us as a district. And it's a little complicated. And I know you guys have heard us talk about the PPRA. Never heard of that until this year, Pupil Rights Protection Amendment, which is a federal law. And it has, it provides state and local education agencies, it prohibits them from requiring students to provide information. And there's a whole set of 8 things that we cannot ask. Gender identity is not in there. I would note that. Sexual orientation or sexual attitudes is in there. But there's a whole bunch of them, like income and you can imagine. Attitudes, traits, political parties, blah, blah, blah. So that's where the problem of creating a record comes in. The DPI, Wisconsin DPI, I thought, well, let's look and see what they have to say. Well, they have a lot to say. And I won't say repeat it all, because I know some of you have looked at it. The main goal is creating safe and supportive school environments for all youth, including those who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, because it is essential for their educational success. Further, I know some people have talked about the YRBS, which is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So I looked at 2019, and I know we've talked about those things, but it is really startling when you look at kids who are transgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual. They have double, triple the amount of bullying, threats with a weapon, and suicidal ideation as compared to straight or cisgender youth. So we know these are groups, whether it's trans, gay, bisexual, and they are not alone, that they perhaps need some special care for whatever reason. The group feels vulnerable. The Wisconsin DPI further says that a preferred name for a student can be used without a legal change. For instance, attendance rosters and ID cards to reflect the student's wishes with regards to name and/or gender marker pronouns, regardless of the database information system. The legal name should be used only where specifically required. You can even go back if you've graduated and say, I want my, graduation diploma, that'd be the word. Go back to school. I want my diploma to reflect my name now. And we know people change names for many different reasons. They don't want their birth name. They don't like it. Kids are known by their middle name. They're known by nicknames. I remember saying, do not call my son Benny, because I didn't want him to be associated with Benny Hill. And that's how old I am. I'm like, no, I don't like that name. And you know what? He decided what he wanted on his diploma. I did not decide. I wanted it to be Benjamin. He wanted it to be Ben. Okay. However, we know pretty much that minor children have no rights. They really don't have rights. Their parents have rights for them, but they do not have rights. So if kids want to change something, their parents have to sign on. And we know that that's just the way it is. So I kind of come to the point where you know, kids are in danger if they're trans. Many are kicked out. We know this. We hear about transgender murders. I think what we should be doing is, if we're not going to change the name, or not change name or gender, and the kids don't want to know, I don't see why a student can't say, I want to be known as Ben. I want to be known by my middle name, Stanley, in the class. That shouldn't be a problem. I don't think that, and I'm of the generation, a Gen X person, where it's like, I really don't want to know. We don't care. I could give a crap. I don't care what a person's identity, gender, sexual orientation is. I don't care. It matters, are you a jerk? That's what matters. So if a person who's transgender is a bully, they should be treated as a bully. If a person who is, you know, blonde, fake blonde, dark roots, then they're a bully, then they should be treated as a bully. It's completely blind. It shouldn't matter at all. And I think we do a really poor job with taking care of bullying, because it happens, and bullies are sneaky. They're super sneaky, and they're never the one at fault. They're the victim. So anyway, get back to the point. I think the thing that I would say is, we can, as a school district and a counselor, if a student is struggling with whatever, the counselor's job should be to help them. And whether that is to coach them into speaking to their guardian or their parent about whatever it is, then it should be that. I think it's a bad idea to keep secrets. I think it's a really bad idea, and a school district cannot keep secrets from a family. If a child comes and says, I feel like I'm going to kill myself, and we decide, well, don't tell my parents, we got to tell the parents. You got to reach out and take care of those things. But it's the same thing as for any other student. And if a student who's transgender or bisexual wants to come out, or they're in a home environment that is unstable, neglectful, violent, that is a mandatory reporting situation. So I don't see how we can't do all of these things and center the student as supporting all students in their education and coaching them to become healthy, happy adults, whatever they choose to be.
All right. Any other board members? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. So Nick, I appreciate what you've described as far as the history and what's in this memo, which is not policy. Can you help me with why we would have a student come up here and feel as if we were going to out them? I know you're not in the high school, but I appreciate all the work that's gone into this and all the conversations. But why would a student not feel safe in any of our buildings as it relates to this topic?
Why, any student, or the student that came up and I mean, I guess I'm not.
So specifically,
I would have to speculate, Rob. I can't give you a definitive answer. That's an impossible question for me to answer.
Sorry, I guess more specifically. So there was the series of emails, there was that audio that the entire board got that made some claims. There was some footage in there. I mean, was there something going on outside of policy or outside of what is mentioned in this memo that we're not aware of?
If there are things that are happening deviating from this memo, we will address them and we will deal with them. If the board would like something changed in this memo or would like us to go a different direction, we will do that. But what we're seeking tonight as an administration is direction from the board as to how they would like us to proceed. And so this memo is based on the advice that we've gotten from our legal counsel. If the board would like something different, we're all ears, but we just would like the board then to tell us that.
Yep. Heather, I'm sorry.
Yep, well, that's all right. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So there are at least 3 attorneys in the room, 1, 2, 3, maybe a few more, but most of us are not, which I think makes this a really difficult conversation because in my mind, a lot of this is being driven by fear of being sued. So let's just put that out there, and maybe others would but I mean, that's been my sense, is that a big consideration here is, as stewards of taxpayer resources, we don't want our district to get sued, right? So 2 thoughts regarding that. One is that, so when we're considering this issue, I think we need to weigh, it's kind of like this 3-legged stool, and some folks might feel one leg is more important than the other, but the fear of getting sued, the political will of the community, and what's best for our kids. And I lean toward thinking that we should be starting with the what's best for our kids, not ignoring the other 2 because they're important, and we've seen pendulum swing in other communities, right? I mean, so I think what we don't want to happen, assuming that the folks at this table want to continue serving, is that we do something that really upsets a big chunk of our community, and all of a sudden we have a group of folks on one end of the spectrum or the other who get elected to the school board and then adopt policy that swings the pendulum back the other way. I mean, so there is this, as much as moderation is a horrible word to hear, there is something about being pragmatic, right? So there's that piece. The part to me that's hard with the legal piece, and the litigators maybe in the room can resonate, is that you can look at one question and get really different legal opinions from different attorneys, right? And so we've had the chance to sit with our attorney. I've gone online and looked at some of the legal advice that folks who are arguing for parental rights are leaning on, and then I had the chance to sit in on a webinar with the ACLU. You'd think they were talking about 3 different issues in 3 different states, because they all speak very convincingly about this is where things are at. And I think what's happened in this conversation, and folks that I've spoken with, I've said, I feel like first we have to get on the same page about, okay, what is our current policy and practice, if you will, and that's what Nick is helping us understand tonight, because once we all understand what current policy and practice really are, then we can have the conversation about, is there something there that needs to change? Because I will tell you, there was a lot of misinformation circulating, and there's a lot of the, there's a book that a psychologist wrote called A Walk with Einstein, I think, and it's all about how memory works, and that our minds do not take video recordings, they take pictures, and then when we recall, we have to string the pictures together. And that's why you and your siblings can sit around the table and have a conversation, and later you remember 4 completely different conversations, right? So I will say, and there are some folks in this room whose position I agree with, who have emailed or called, and I've gone, really? Because that's so not what I heard, or that's so not what I read, or that's so not what was said. And so I think part of this is around, I really do not believe that there was ever a directive around, you are required to refer the student to their counselor, and that counselor is required to call their parents. I really don't think that ever happened, and yet that got out, that was policy. And actually what we're talking about is practice, because we have very few policies actually related to this issue. And so that's kind of another conversation for the board, is do we need more policy and or do we need more procedure or practice? So this memo is kind of a stab at practice that supports the procedure, and I think, yes, informing the community, but also hopefully giving staff some guidance, because I think this is a really hard time to be a staff member in our district, especially at the middle and high school level, because there's not a lot of really clear answers there about what they should or shouldn't do. Like, am I required to refer the student to the counselor or not? Can I use their preferred name verbally as long as I don't update it in the system? So I think once we settle on policy, then I do think we need to adopt something that provides a little more guidance for staff and a little more clarity for the community so they can understand this really is where we sit, and from there we can have a conversation around, do we need to move our butts? Like, are we sitting in the right spot? But at least we know where we're sitting. And so I don't know, Nick, that this is something, I should say, I don't believe this is something that we're going to resolve this evening. I realize we need to give you some direction so you can move forward, but with the legal confusion and the direction, this is a tough one. I personally have a really hard time. I shouldn't say I get, because I still don't understand what the most right answer is, but the whole thing around what do we need to change things in Skyward? So that's that legal question that I think we need to decide. What interpretation are we going to embrace and put into our policy? But to allow a staff member to at least address a student by their preferred pronouns and use their preferred name, even if that's not in Skyward, to me that seems like a reasonable compromise, even if we land on the whole Skyward needs to follow the interpretation of the law. But there again, I think we need to be really clear when giving direction to staff, because otherwise they're afraid that they're going to do something that's going to violate the procedure that supports the policy, and that leaves us all in a bad place. So that was more than my time, but that's where I'm at. Thank you. That's right, no problem.
Okay. Another thank you for that. Others, Kate?
I guess I hear a lot of what you're saying. My concern would be that perhaps a child wants to be called by a different pronoun, and the teacher's doing that, and then a parent calls to talk about maybe their student's progress, and that comes out. The parent didn't know that there's a different pronoun that they're being called. As a parent myself of a high schooler, that would break my heart to hear that maybe these trusted adults knew about it, but I didn't. And I would hope that that counselor, and I heard the high school students' experience, and that makes me really sad. I don't think that was the intention, that they've decided they're gay, and they go to a counselor, and then that counselor calls the family immediately. I don't think that's the intention of this policy, so I'm concerned that either that's gotten out there or that happened to them. I would like to hear more about it. But I personally, this is obviously a hard topic. I think the administration is trying to do their best to come up with the best plan. I personally think that this is an appropriate policy or memorandum. And like Molly said, if we do have fear that those kids are going to go home and get kicked out or be abused, they're mandated reporters. And that's their job, to go ahead and say, are you scared to go home tonight? What kind of things can we put into place to help you?
All right, thank you, Kate. Carrie, I saw you adjusting your microphone.
I guess I have a lot of questions too, but regardless of the legal potential ramifications, is this something that the Mental Health Advisory Council or Board is discussing and addressing?
It's definitely one of our topics. Our next hope is to bring in the speaker to discuss some of the support for staff, community members as a whole, but definitely on the radar.
Okay. I guess I kind of agree with Heather that using the name that the child would like without officially changing Skyward, but then to Kate's point, if that parent gets the call with a different name or a different pronoun, it could be very hurtful, but it also could be potentially a violent situation. So I fully get that. So not easy.
Mr. President.
Yeah, Bob.
I think there's some misinterpretation of the goals or the history, and I hear people say, well, what changed? What changed about this policy? Nick has an agenda, Mr. Ballard has an agenda. It comes back to the board. Nick gave you the dates. I mean, we talked about this. We talked about this repeatedly. The board was asked, are you okay with this practice? We were talked to the attorney. Sorry. I'll start again. I think that there's some misperception out there as far as the history, like something changed. I heard some people say something changed in the community. What changed? Really, our practice did not change since the beginning of this, and Nick gave you the dates, gave us the dates of the communications we had and the conversations with the attorney. And the board is, some people say, well, the board has no idea what's going on. Well, we do have an idea of the practice. It was discussed, it was agreed upon by this board. And you know, I've reached out to peers in other districts, and we are very, thought of as very reasonable approach with this, knowing that there is current things going on in cases in other areas that will determine the law in Wisconsin moving forward. The Madison case was talked about as being a definitive. Well, it was dismissed on standing, so it's not really the Kettle Moraine case that's going in right now. That's very interesting and could be very telling. Personally, I understand, I don't understand trying to have two separate lives coming out in a high school situation fraught with 1,500 kids that talk, and as far as as that being the one safe place, I don't know that a high school is the safest place, and to have a policy where we're asking teachers and nursing staff and to protect by a name, and then a parent finding out through through other ways, it takes the control that student had away as well. And I know I'm not saying this the best way, and but you can't put this on our administration. You know, we are looking for a reasonable approach here, and you know, we're trying our best to come up with something that is protected for all. We have to realize that bullying is the main thing here, and I don't want to make light of it, but it is very difficult. I agree with what Kate said. I agree with Molly put it very well about the situation where we are. Sorry for speaking very poorly.
All right. I don't know.
Jamie, can I make
Yes.
one addition?
Sure.
I think it's important to clarify, because again, I don't want people to think that we are misrepresenting the question about has anything changed. So I think Nick is very transparent about here's what we've said in the past 4 months, and it's been pretty consistent in the past 4 months. I think one thing that has changed, and we're talking about policy and practice, is I do think it's accurate to say that there were things that there was practice in our district that now staff have been told actually aren't aligned with policy. And so I do think, you know, people are frustrated because they're saying it almost feels like a step backward, because teachers used to be able to do this, they used to be able to do that, whether staff knew it was happening or not, but now they're being told, no, because of our policy and this direction around what that policy means, you can't do that anymore. So I feel like we should acknowledge that for staff, for students, it does feel like a change. It is a change because they're being told you might have done that before, but you can't do it anymore. Surveys around preferred pronouns, et cetera, you know, they happen in the past. So I think it's important to acknowledge that more longitudinal, that there is, for some teachers, for some students, a change in what's permitted, even though, honestly, since we've started talking about this for the past 4 months, the messaging has been pretty consistent from administration about, we have very limited policy on this, we're going to try and provide some guidance on practice, and then this memo is, I think, for the first time, trying to put that guidance into print, and I hope we will be able to get some more detail into that guidance, both now and as we move forward. But I just want to acknowledge that, because that's real to students and staff in our district, that feels like it is a change.
Yeah. And, yeah, thank you, Heather, for that comment. I think that the difficulty of this situation and this whole circumstance is indicative of the fact that every comment by every board member is correct. Nobody is wrong here, all right? Everyone, everything that's been said is correct. This memo is exactly what my understanding was when this was first explained to us 4 months ago. It just wasn't in writing before. And we are a policy-making board, all right? When you do policy, you do your best. We already have a policy that does talk about anti-discrimination, not just with race and gender, but gender identification and sexuality. We have that. I would like to see that, enforced emphatically. It does break my heart to have bullying going on, and we want to be able to root that out and stop that. Just like we don't want any student to be feeling unsafe or to be exposed to dangerous situations at home. So that is correct. And if you go through each of these paragraphs, now, some of the things that some folks have said that they understood the policy, or when I heard it explained, that's what I heard. I think, Heather, that was a very good comment that you made. People can hear the same thing. I have 4 brothers, and yes, when we get together and we remember things that happened 40 years ago, we remember them differently. And it can happen even if it happened 4 hours ago. So the attempt to come up with something that provides a practice, you're never going to have every possible factual scenario accounted for in any kind of written policy or even a procedure guidance such as what we have up here on the board. The board has been supportive of the policy as it was explained, and I have not heard anyone say that they're not supportive of what's in this memo. Now, putting it into practice and having these specific scenarios of nicknames, of course. I mean, somebody put it out, Molly did, about her son. And I'm an example of that. Everyone that knows me as Jamie, but my legal birth certificate name is James. And I don't think that there was anything wrong with the fact that I was referred to by Jamie by everyone. So I have that same issue with being able to have a teacher. I mean, for my math teacher, he was also my wrestling coach. And he called me a different nickname that wasn't Jamie. I was fine with it. And I never told my parents what it was. There's no quote-unquote forced outing here in the sense that we want to have teachers, counselors be trusted adults. There's no doubt about that. And we can, what's the word I'm looking for? We want to support those relationships. But what we don't want to risk and jeopardize is the partnerships and collaborations we have with parents and with families. We had a presentation about family engagement. And yes, this is about students, but students don't learn without the support of families. And our preference is to have the students have the support of parents. If that's not possible, it's unfortunate. But again, I see it, if the student is not ready to discuss that with the family, and then they continue to work with the counselor, I'm in favor of getting the student in that position. And we're talking about minor students, and Molly indicated that really the rights are limited, as it's been explained by our counsel. And again, and Heather's also right, that different attorneys can see the same case and come up with different interpretations, but we have to go, this is not necessarily about the fear of being sued. And for those folks who have submitted that in their emails, if you don't do it our way, we're going to sue you. I guess then that's going to happen. This is not something where we're setting policy based on a fear of being sued or not. We're trying to do the right thing. It's not an easy issue, as I stated. Everyone here has their comments that they've made. They have all been true. And we want to be able to do what's in the best interest of all of our students. I don't know what more to add other than I support the other comments the other board members have made. If there's others that want to make more comments, but I would entertain a motion at some point as to direction for the administration on this issue. And
I
Heather?
guess I would just go back. I think at one point during your comments, you said something like the board is supportive of what's here. I think early on, one thing, and this might be I misheard, but the part of this that I'm not comfortable with and not supportive is the way that it's laid out in the third paragraph. I really do think we need a path for students to be called and known at school by their preferred names and pronouns, even if we don't get to the point where that gets changed in Skyward. I like the idea that we strongly encourage and support them, really try to encourage them, hey, let's see if we can't get you to a point where you're comfortable talking to your parents about this. And students know their parents better than we do. So I think that, if there's students that really can't go there, I believe in the state of Wisconsin, there's something about once you're 14-ish, you have the ability to go to court and make this happen. I think we should be letting our students know about this. I mean, yes, they're 14, and these are young people with a whole lot of agency. So I think we need to treat them as the children/young adults that they are and give them the tools. I hear what you're saying. I think we need to let students know. If we don't go to talk to your parents, if they don't know about this, if we don't update, there's a chance. I'm going to get so used to calling you by your preferred name and pronoun that when your mom calls, I'm going to call you that. And the student then has the ability to make that decision that I am not ready to go to my parents. That's the part that I would like to see changed in this for me to feel supportive about moving forward with it as guidance for our district.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest worrisome piece that we have as administration is we know that whenever that conversation has to happen with a child and their parents, that's a big conversation. And the last thing we want is our teachers to feel as though they're trying to manage two sets of names and they accidentally call home and use the wrong name, and all of a sudden as the kid's walking into the house and the parent's hanging up the phone with the school, and all of a sudden the kid is blindsided by this conversation with their parent that they weren't ready to have, that they weren't feeling comfortable with. Because the one thing we do know is that we will not operate without potentially messing this up. I mean, we have a lot of staff members in the district. We have a lot of moving parts. As Bob talked about, different people that come and go in the building. And so that was part of the rationale behind not changing those things until that conversation has happened, but also not saying to the child that because you told me, I have to tell your parents. We've never wanted to go down that route. And so I think that has been the big piece that has been somewhat, I think, mixed up in the communication of this or whatever that may be. But it's trying to find that balance. And I think it's not if you don't agree with me or you don't agree with this person or that person that you're automatically against them. It's trying to get to, I think everybody's trying to get to a good spot for all of our kids. And people have a different opinion of what's the best way to get there. And I think that's the challenge. And as Jamie said, there are lots of legal interpretations, and as Heather said, but at the end of the day, when we talk about getting legal advice, I would encourage the board to take the legal advice from the people that have to defend you, giving you the advice. Not that, and I would absolutely agree, the reason we have courts is because two attorneys will look at the same thing and say, it reads totally different. If they didn't, we wouldn't have courts. That's why we have them. And so I guess really what we need, and the way this came about is people say, what do I do right now? Some people say, well, can we put this to a longer conversation? We can have a longer conversation. I'm just asking you, how would you like us to act right now? Because that's what staff wants to know. What is the direction as of right now? What's not what's the direction in 6 months or 5 months or in 3 months? And that's kind of where this came from, where this directive came from is what is the expectation as of right now? And that's where this started. It was not from ill intent. It was not from any type of transphobia. It was not from any type of not wanting to support kids. It was trying to figure out in a most practical sense, how can we be supportive of our kids? How can we be supportive of our staff so that they are not bearing some of these things on their own?
We know that our counseling staff is better equipped to handle these conversations than our teaching staff. Not that they can't be good at this, not that they can't be a trusted adult, but we don't want them on their own holding on to this. And I think somebody brought up, if somebody was to do something, or if a child, because we know these youth are very vulnerable, and we know through the YBRS data that more likely to have mental suicidal situations and things like that, we would want to get more people that have the training working with these kids, not fewer people. And that was the intent behind this. It was not to force out kids. It was to make sure that we didn't have a staff member that's trying to manage this on their own. They don't have the training to manage this on their own. A child does something that we don't even want to speak of, and then a parent coming back to us and saying, how could you have not told me my child was struggling with this? I could have gotten them help. Or for that staff member then to have to live with, potentially, I didn't make the right choice, and this child did X, Y, or Z. That's where this came from. It wasn't from a place of not wanting to be supportive of kids. And that, I just want to make sure everybody understands, that's where we were coming from this. It was not because we are not supportive of children that happen to be gender nonconforming. That was not the intent. And so what we need, because our staff needs it, is is the board okay with this direction? Do they want changes? But we need some decision by the board so that we can move forward, so that, again, the people in the community can move forward and know what the direction is.
Mr. President? Go ahead, Bob.
As to what Nick was saying, that's one of the struggles I have, is that I believe an audience member said, one caring parent can make a life-saving difference in a child's life. And so when I look at some of this, where if you're not trying to advise that child to communicate with the parent, you take that away. And yes, mandatory reporting for potential violence, but I just can't see keeping secrets from parents. Like Nick said it better than I can, is that if something happened, to get that word, I had no idea my child was seeking advice, was struggling. That does happen. I know loving parents that had kids that came out, and the kids did not want to talk to their parents first. They wanted to come out in school. I know that happens. I'm not denying it. Is it the best way for the school to be able to serve that child, though? That I can't guarantee you.
Okay. Rob?
So Nick, you're asking for, direction tonight, and certainly there are seven seats at the table here. The challenge I have is that this is a really important memo, and you're asking for direction. I'm not an attorney, although I know that you've spoken with the school district's attorney. I'm not a school psychologist. I don't have a transgender child. It's difficult for just talking for myself, to provide to you any kind of direction. This is certainly better than what we had. But as far as where to edit, what changes to make, how to make it better, how to make sure our teachers, staff, and students feel that they're getting strong, positive direction from this, I don't have any, I'm not qualified to provide that direction to you.
Mr. President?
Okay. Yes, Heather.
I think it was Tamira who said something like, while it's important to listen to everyone, science should not bow to unfounded opinions.
Yeah, it was my daughter, a 2020
Okay, I mean, there is research on this. There are so yes, there might be a time where a parent could have, would have, and so the question is how often is that versus the other? And there's research on that we can look at and say, so as a district, if we're looking to research, what is the evidence-based practice for supporting these youth? And my gut is, I haven't looked at it,
but that it would lean toward it's supporting them in school. Not to say that there couldn't be a time where a parent would legitimately say, my goodness, if you had told me, I think I could have done something. I don't want to minimize that, but I feel like this is one of those cases where as an institution of learning that we should be looking at what does the research tell us about how to best support transgender kids, and that's that.
Mr. President?
Yes, Molly.
In my extensive research on the DPI website, not really, just this, they had 3 things that school districts should do. And one of them is an anti-bullying policy, specifically enumerating protections for gender identity or expression or sexual orientation. And of course, it applies to everyone. We should have, I don't know, I think we do have a lot of bullying. I really do. Then also training teachers on intervention strategies and knowing what to do, what to say, all the things. And then the other thing is having school-based support groups or clubs like the GSA Club or Alliance, excuse me, GSA Club. So doing those things, and I really feel like, you know, 15-year-olds, that's really hard. It's hard to be a kid. And any kid can benefit, and I would call it coaching, and I would say coaching, how to problem solve. And this is why we have social emotional learning, and I know this is a really difficult topic, and it's not seen the same way by everyone, but we do need to have kids know how to work through problems. So I think it's an opportunity. So I don't know what we can do in some of those things. I know we do some of those already, but really focusing on helping kids.
Mr. President?
Yes, Heather.
If we're looking for action tonight, the action I'd be willing to support, so the motion that I would be willing to make is that administration move ahead with an expanded version of this guidance that provides staff with the ability to use students' preferred pronouns and names while explaining to them that they can't make that official in the system unless their parents are involved, and offering to connect them with counseling resources that could help them engage their parents to get to that point. That's the action I would be willing to support tonight, so that's a motion.
Okay, so so I'm clear, are you supporting that basically the memorandum be amended to include that?
Well, I'd like to see the memorandum expanded to include some more detail in general, but specifically that would be the substantive change to the guidance, would be to that 3rd paragraph.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Further discussion? Yes,
I
Kate.
know it's not going to be popular in this room, but we are all in a different, kind of nice to have different views. I will not support lying to parents, and I think that's what we're doing if we do that. I absolutely will not.
All right, and, but I also point out that Heather's motion, well, it could possibly, be basically we're adding things to the memo, or are you saying that you want the administration to look into it and then see how it could be amended before coming back?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So then in the meantime, if, that's going to take at least 1 or 2 meetings before we get to it, so then the question begs the question, what do we do in the meantime?
Well, I think the underlying direction were that motion to pass is pretty clear, and I would hope that administration would act accordingly. I also wonder, and I don't know if it would ever get you to a yes vote on this one, Kate, but I think part of what I was trying to say is let's not lie to parents. Let's be straight with kids. So that they say, hey, if we don't bring your parents in when they call, because I'm not in favor of lying to parents, but I am first and foremost in favor of supporting our kids.
Mr. President.
Rob.
So, Heather, I struggle a little bit with what you said. The struggle that I have with the motion is, how do we, with the intent of keeping our kids safe, and within the memo, it talks about working with the kid to better prepare for a conversation with their parents. And if, we move forward and our students, the staff are all, it's approved to start using their new pronouns, their new names and what have you. We had River stand in front of us today talking about the bullying situation and what have you. Getting back to if the parent were to call or a staff member were to call that parent and they have not had that conversation, are we creating potentially more harm? And I think every student should feel welcomed and know that school is a safe place. But at the same time, I want to make sure that every student is embraced and properly prepared to, have that conversation. And and again, I don't have a trans, child. I don't know much about this topic. I'm learning more. But if our main intent is to educate and ultimately protect our kids, does your motion do that? And if it does, that's great. And if it does, I'm supportive. I want to make sure that we're not lying to parents and, that most importantly, our kids are safe.
I don't know that there's an approach that would work better. I'm not sure there's a good solution here. I think it gets us a lot of the way. And again, and this is why I appreciate, Nick, your comments about our counseling staff being the ones who are really trained to have these conversations with kids. I think we need to engage these kids in conversations about this request and what it means and what it could mean. And I think we should say to them, because we don't want to lie to your parents. I think that's okay to say to them. I think to not go that direction because we're afraid that we might make a mistake down the road feels like I don't ever want to go to Hawaii because what if I wanted to live there and I couldn't? I still want to go to Hawaii. It's still a good thing, even though if ultimately it might create some dissonance. So, that's really trivializing my vacation plans and the struggles that our trans kids are going. So I hope you will humor me with understanding. But I feel like I don't know how to get it more of the way there, given where we're at right now. But this, to me, feels like the best step forward.
But so going to Hawaii is different than a child coming home and their parents saying, "Here's your bags, get out."
And I hope I just acknowledged that. So that was trivializing it. But my point is, I don't think we shouldn't do a good thing because we haven't figured out all of the way to the finish line. Maybe these kids can help us figure out the way to the finish line. I would love to see us engaging these kids in this conversation because they know their lives much better than we do. Maybe they can. Maybe they can get us there.
All right, Heather, so are you advocating, and you talked about the third paragraph, and we haven't, I'm assuming you're talking about the middle sentence, basically taking out the part of until we have parental consent, and then instead allowing teachers to use different names and pronouns and what's in the school system.
Yeah, I think we should be clear that the student information system isn't going to be updated. So their formal name in the student information system can only be updated either with parental consent or if they go this other route that I don't understand where you go to the courts. But that for practices of their lives at school, that staff can use their names. And that brings up probably a whole nother legal question, which is, my assumption is once they are legally updated in the system with parental consent, then you run into discrimination, like staff actually have to use,
Yes.
right? Their preferred names.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing that if it's not there, then you don't have to. So they could have some staff members, I don't know, who are going to say, I'm not going to use that name, and probably there's not legal standing to ask them to do so. That's, again, the legal mumbo jumbo, but I don't know how long this memo can be, but those are some of the questions. Again, I have a feeling more questions are going to come up as this rolls out because we're going to realize, we didn't think about that, but this could be a dynamic document as long as we don't completely change course and confuse people.
And those questions are why I would have trouble supporting this tonight. I would want to know more about what this looks like and how it would be put into practice with our staff.
I think the reality is it's letting our staff go back to how they were practicing before September. Where it was very individualized. I mean, like, it was, I will do that or I won't, except that we're now, would be formally giving them the permission to do that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Would a potential change to this policy be in the third paragraph, simply removing the sentence until we have parental consent, we'll continue to use the name provided by families, just take that out and make it clear that at no time will it ever be mandated that parents be contacted if, without student permission.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that
to
would be good
to the
for
point, though, that we've said, or it's been said, that, you know, we move forward as we figure this out, it shouldn't lose the point that we are, these are children's lives, and we could be endangering them with a policy like this by allowing the names, as we feel we're trying to support them. So.
Is there other comments? So I guess
I don't have any clarity on this direction. So are you saying that the motion would be that the memo would stand with the exception of you would allow staff to continue to use preferred names and preferred pronouns, whatever the child asks them to use? Is that what I'm hearing the board say, or at least what I'm hearing the motion say? Because right now we're saying they can't use them until parent permission. So the opposite of that would be you don't need parent permission to use those.
You can use them. Parental
What-
permission would be required if they want them formally changed, and we would
But that's
support
the law. The parent
Yep,
permission is the
okay,
law
yep,
related to their student records. But, so the motion would be to do the opposite of this one, which would be, without telling parents, go ahead and use different names and different pronouns. I'm not arguing one way or the other, I want to make sure I'm clear, so that as we draft the guidance for staff, I understand what exactly it is that you're voting on, and that everybody else knows what they're voting on, and then I know how to draft this. for
So
staff.
yes, the motion would be that staff be permitted to use students' preferred names and pronouns, that the formal names and pronouns in our student information system would be updated only with the involvement of parents, and that in a situation like this, staff and counselors would work with and encourage the student to involve their parents, but not require it. And I like that, and I like what Carrie said, that we make it clear in the memo that at no point are we going to force, notify a parent about this without the student's consent.
I just have to say, however, if a teacher mistakenly does that, then that kind of goes against what you're saying. Or
Well,
if there
responds to a phone call or.
Right, right.
Yeah, there's the formal notify, like I picked up the phone and called and said, hey, I wanted you to know about a conversation I had with your kid today. But there's the what could happen where there's a regular parent-teacher interaction and something is said that all of a sudden notifies the parent that the kid is using a different pronoun or name in school. Yeah?
Any other comments, questions? I guess with regard to the motion that's before the board, I don't think that I would be able to support it without having a discussion with our legal counsel. And because this is much different than what was discussed by the board on prior occasions. This hasn't been the direction of the board before. And so until we have the legal advice, discuss it in the closed session like we did previously, and then give better guidance to the administration,
I feel like
can't support amending this policy here at the table.
I feel like that might be needlessly delaying. I mean, my recollection of our conversation with legal counsel is that she said the safest route
would be to not do any of this until parents are involved, and that as you step away from that, you are putting yourselves at risk. So, I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know if anybody else remembers that, but that's kind of what I remember hearing her saying. And so, and I guess my follow-up with question would be, and if she says, yes, this would put you at risk, does that mean we're not going to support it? And I guess that's a question for each of us to think about. But again, legal risk, how much, there are levels of legal risk, and how much, if any, legal risk are we willing as a board to take on to do, if it is indeed to do what we think is right? And if it's the legal opinion that is perhaps keeping us from voting in support, that's something to think about.
Nick, could the Kettle Marine case have direct effect on this and make this whole discussion moot?
Yeah, the Kettle Marine case will, I would assume, be probably the most definitive case right now, pending in front of the Wisconsin judicial system. And because there's no question about whether or not the parents have standing, because it directly impacted them and their child related to the Kettle Marine case. And so, whereas the Madison case, there was question about standing because they were hypothetical situations brought by 14 anonymous plaintiffs. That's not the case in the Kettle Marine case. And I think, and I know everybody is boiling this down to just legal exposure. I think, and this is where, the question would be too, is what would be our direction to staff if a parent was to call and ask them point blank, has my child talked to you about this, or has my child asked you to do a different name? What is going to be the board's directive to staff? Because as you can see, this is not an overly easy topic. There's the legal side, but then there's also the side of whether or not people's opinion are that the parents should be involved in these decisions. This memo is going to err on the side of believing that the parents should be involved in these decisions and that the child can't make them unilaterally. Okay? If you want the other direction, it's more than just what's our legal exposure. And I think that, this memo was written from a standpoint of, we believe these are really, really, really big life decisions, and that the parents should be part of those decisions. And that the child is not making those on their own. And, but that's where the memo is written from. So everybody keeps wanting to say, oh, well, we don't care about kids' rights, we only care about being sued. We get threatened with lawsuits all the time. So it's not about whether or not, we obviously, if we've gotten advice, to go against your legal advice is not usually the best way to defend yourself long-term, but it's in addition to that is also, the belief that parents should be involved in this conversation, more than just the legal defense. And I think everybody keeps boiling it down to the legal defense. It's not just that, it's also the parents being involved.
I think we're creating an artificial dichotomy. My guess is that there's no one in this room who would not say, yes, in the best situations, we want parents involved in these situations. This isn't about the best of situations. Mm-hmm. This is about the situations where the teacher talks to the kid and the kid says, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think about, and I don't know how they all relate, but as the parent of a 16-year-old daughter, I know there are some things that my daughter right now can get health and mental services for, and I don't have a right to know about it. Because at some point, someone's decided there's a reason why some things we support the kid and the decisions they're making, and the parents are kept out a little bit. I don't know if this is a parallel situation, but I think, again, I don't want to create, and I think we have to be careful about the words that we choose as if we can write it this way or this. It's not about, I don't think, do we or don't we think parents ideally should be involved in their kids' lives. It's about what do we do as a district in cases where the student says that is not an option, and how do we respond?
Well, and I think, and that's fine. I just want to make sure we understand where we're coming from, and we have gotten the legal advice that school counselors, school staff do not carry the same
patient-doctor confidentiality that you would get in mental health services. They just don't. There is no, that just doesn't exist. People can say it exists, they can want to say it exists, but it unequivocally, there are like 2 carve-outs in the law. They happen to deal with drug and alcohol abuse. The attorney went through them very extensively. And so we don't have the ability to keep things from parents. That is just the bottom line. And so, unless something changes, unless there's a new case or new case law, if a parent asks, our expectation is either A, we tell them, or B, you're going to, the staff member's going to not be truthful. But there's no, I can't tell you because my job doesn't permit me to tell you. That does not exist. We have been given that advice rather clearly, that there is no confidentiality piece there as it relates to that. That just doesn't exist.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Yeah, Carrie, you have some.
How about, until we have parental consent, we will continue to formally use the name and still make it clear that, for the students, that it will not be mandated that this will be communicated to their parents unless they're ready for that. So it doesn't prohibit a teacher from using a preferred name, but it's acknowledging that it won't be formally enforced, that chosen name or pronoun.
Yeah, I have to lean on kind of what Jamie said. That's a different direction. I would say that.
I think the part about not mandating is articulating what you've been saying and what we've understood.
Yeah,
all
the
along.
non-mandate, we absolutely put that in there, that it's not mandated that because a child comes to a teacher, they automatically have to call their parents or the counselor. We can absolutely, put that in there. That's not the same as changing somebody's name and pronouns. Those are 2 totally separate, so absolutely, I think we can add that component of not requiring that. I don't think that's in dispute. The big thing that becomes in dispute is before we actually make some changes, and I know people wanted to, they're not happy that I kept talking about experiences at school and it was a broken record, but before they want something different, a different name, a different bathroom use, a different pronoun, is that conversation is had with parents before we do those things. But absolutely, just because a child comes to a teacher or comes to a counselor and says, I think I may be this, or I'm struggling with that, or things like that, that should not automatically require that person to call home. It's that when they want that different, be treated differently at school because of that, that's what the original intent of the memo was, and that maybe wasn't specified enough in there, but we can put that in there. But then there comes the point of, what do you do in the meantime? Between the time the kid comes and talks to you to the time there's the parent conversation. And then what do you do? And this is essentially the Kettle Moraine case, is the kid talks to the parent says, no, I don't want it changed. I want you to pause for a minute on this. And the district says, no, we're going to honor what the kid wants, regardless of what the parent wants. The parents now are suing Kettle Moraine. That's why it's kind of a definitive case of whose rights trump whom's, in that process. And then the student was pulled from school and that process. But we absolutely can put in here, there is not a mandate that a staff member, because a child came to them and said, I may be gay, or I may be thinking of transgender, or those kind of conversations, that automatically means that conversation needs to happen with the parent. It really comes down the line of if we change the way things happen at school, because I think the other piece is when you don't make it everybody doing the same thing, I don't know how we would have a child's first period's teacher call them one name, the second period teacher call them a different name, the third period teacher call them a different name. That's usually why we try to stick with.
And that's where I think I would like to have students involved in this conversation? Because I'd like to know, will they say, hey, if I can get 2 teachers to call me by my name and acknowledge me by my pronoun, I'll take the 2 teachers? If that's what, I mean, if that's what they say, then I'd say, well, then they get to deal with the other 6 teachers that don't, in lieu of bringing their parents and informally changing things. I'm not comfortable moving ahead supporting what is this? Memorandum that doesn't allow for that acknowledgement at school when it works, recognizing that there's other stuff to work out. And I think, my guess is having the same experience, I can make sense of that, and I think there are a lot of times when kids don't have the experience at school that they would expect, but we aren't notifying them. I would expect my kid eats lunch every day. She doesn't. Nobody is notifying me that she doesn't eat lunch. I mean, so I think there are other times when kids don't have the same experience, and so I feel like we've kind of glommed on to this one with that, not recognizing that there are a lot of times when parents don't know exactly what's happening every minute of their student's day, and we probably can't make sure they know exactly what every minute of their student's day is like. So I guess we can table that motion if people aren't ready to move ahead without actually seeing in writing kind of what we're supporting, but I'm not able to support this as it's written right now.
Well, the motion is to adopt and amend the memorandum, but particularly to remove the parental consent requirement before different names and pronouns are used. That's the motion.
And to add the piece that clarifies that we're not going to immediately call parents or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not hearing, that second part that you just added, I don't know that there's any board member that says that shouldn't be in there.
I think I don't know that you would say, we wouldn't call a parent. I would kind of leave that alone. I would say we'll use your preferred name, and there's nothing wrong with using a preferred name on a roster. Isn't there? So, with the idea in mind that teachers have lots of students, and they're going to get it wrong once in a while. So I would not put anything about parents or not parents, or I think it's a can of worms. I mean, as much as I think, morally, kids should be able to decide. It just legally goes back to kids don't have rights, good or bad. So.
Mr. President, separate from this memo, I think something you said quite a while ago now regarding the non-discrimination policy is that it needs to be more strongly enforced. I think that's a key point, that we need to recognize that a huge amount of bullying exists and could be better addressed.
Okay. Well, I've heard discussion about potentially tabling, but we've got a motion. We have a second. I'm not hearing any further discussion. All those in favor of, yes?
I guess if there was any change, I'd like to see it in writing before we would vote on it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we need a little more time to have this, get it right, rather than short-term urgency.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to table then.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. There's no debate. All those in favor of tabling the motion for the exact wording of the memorandum of understanding for what the procedure or practice is in implementing this subject matter, signify by saying aye for tabling.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, and the motion is tabled.
So, quick question, what exactly would you like us to write and bring back to you? Is it what the motion was that Heather made? Is that what I'm hearing you say? I just need to know what.
I have a procedural legal question. Would it legally be permissible, as an example, for Kate and I to work with you, to give you feedback as you're working on something? Is that legally, I realize the whole board can't exchange emails because of walking quorum, et cetera, but I think, being generally in the same place about what we're trying to do, but having some unique perspectives about what we want to make sure we address, is that allowed? Because I don't envy you trying to go back and take this conversation and now put it into 4 new sentences or whatever.
I mean,
Well, I think it still
Whatever you
comes
guys want.
down to a vote of whether or not, the vote was to table the motion, so we didn't get a vote on the motion. So now we still, are we saying that we're going to allow students to change their own name and pronoun without parental consent?
Well, and that's the revised thing that will come back
Yeah.
to our next meeting, right? So my question was, can Nick confer with a few board members as he is working on that revised memo to come back to the next meeting or not? Can he do that? I mean, I'm assuming he can, because he
yeah,
can
no,
confer with
I
you.
absolutely can, but, you know, in the meantime, you know, then does this directive stay in place until something else changes, is typically what would happen. Until the board takes action and say, no, we're gonna change this directive, this would stay in place until a new directive or new directions given.
Well, there would have been no reason to table the motion if we had the exact wording, right?
So it would be that this would stay in place until
That would have
there is
to
a
be,
new,
right?
a new memo.
Right, and that was, I mean, honestly, that was the reason behind my nay vote, is as much as I, like, get that we have to get it right, it does mean that it's another 3 weeks or so that we're living with guidance. What's that?
It'd probably be at the
Oh, is it
regular,
next
it'd
week
probably be
already?
at the regular board meeting, I would say, January 9th.
So,
Yeah, 3 weeks
But
is
that's
New
where we're
Year's. Our next meeting is January 9th, so.
Yep.
okay.
All right. Well, I guess, again, drafts of, this memorandum was given to the board with the agenda. I imagine a new draft would, you know, be given to the board before there would be full
Yep.
discussion by the board, right?
Yep, and just so you know, I mean, I won't send it to, I mean, if I send it to all of you, it's not going to be, let's wordsmith this back and forth outside the meeting. I mean, that's literally
Right.
what the meeting's for,
Yes.
is for everybody to share their perspective in front of the public, so that the perspective is not, you know, behind closed doors. Absolutely can at least create a draft with 1 or 2 board members to work on it. But then once I send you guys the draft memo, the expectation will not be that the board is talking about it, conversing about it, interacting about it until the next board meeting is when you guys would actually start talking about it, because otherwise that would be in violation of the open meetings law, which means you have to have those conversations in front of everybody. Can't do it.
And I assume that for those on the board who enjoy wordsmithing, they would be permitted to send you suggestions for how we might say something, and then you would be able to take that into consideration. That would be a way to.
They can send directly to me.
Yep.
Well, if it's going to the 9th, if it's going to the next board meeting, and this is basically a small committee we're forming, why wouldn't we just discuss it at the committee meeting, or at the work session? I mean, I don't know.
It's whatever you guys would like to do.
Again, I would like, we had attorney input on, I'm assuming that this memo
Yes.
was run past
Yes.
Shayna, and she had approved this one. And I would want to see it run past legal before we wordsmith it or sit here and redraft it as a group on January 9th. So I think
Okay.
it should be
Fair.
with council's.
And if you prefer, I mean,
Input.
we can draft it as a board policy and do the standard readings. Instead of it being a memo, we'll just draft a board policy, and then it'll go through a first reading, a second reading, and then a final approval.
Nick, doesn't that fly in the face of the counsel we were given originally?
The written memo kind of does that. I mean, that's, you know, I think that's the, at this point, especially if it's a direction that the board wants to change, and it may not be that all board members are on the same page, then I would recommend that you go down the formal policy procedure process, where we draft something, it goes to first reading, it goes to second reading, and then goes into adoption based on what the board decides. Because typically, we would not have board members drafting administrative memos. That's why they come from the
makes
administration
sense.
and not the,
That makes sense to me. I mean, that's the rule policy, right? So,
So Nick, if an administrative administrative memo is not something that the board would, you know, review, edit, what have you, then why does the board need to approve it?
Well, you can do it at the board meeting, you can review.
But
and
if it's
edit.
not
More- I'm
policy.
just saying, we wouldn't typically get two board members outside of a board meeting help draft an administrative memo, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But absolutely, you guys could review and edit at a board meeting, say, yep, we are supportive of this, or no, we're not supportive of it. And that's really what we were looking for, you know, to kind of start with, so. But if you're wanting to have more of drafting of the, you know, more formal process draft language, then we could handle it like we would handle any other board policy processes. We come up with a draft, and then the board works through it through the work sessions and then the regular meetings, that process.
So our next work session to be able to do that would be the January
23rd. Well,
23rd.
yeah, that would be our next work session.
So if in fact you didn't need counsel on just redrafting this memo, you could present that to us next week. We could discuss it and then approve or not at the January meeting and just keep it as a memo. Is that correct?
Oh, I mean, I guess I've heard one board member say they wouldn't want to vote on it until it's been reviewed by the legal counsel. And so whether it's a board policy or a memo, we can have it reviewed. I can't guarantee we can get it reviewed in 6 days.
Okay.
Drafted and reviewed. That's why I said it's probably more likely to be more of the January timeframe than 6 days from now.
I think some wise words were said that I think it's important that we get this right. And so I wouldn't want to do it in a vacuum from legal counsel or making comment that legal counsel giving us the guidance on whether or not this needs to be a policy or whether it should remain a administrative memo. And so I don't think that can be done in 1 week. So I would say let's put this on for the next work session, which would be the January 23rd, pending getting some more input from legal counsel and potential drafts of, you know, changing this or enacting it into policy. Because typically our policies are not this detailed. So,
Nope.
right, is there any thinking different than that? I'm not hearing any. Next item on our agenda is financial considerations of capital and operating levies and elementary facility planning.
And this item, it's not a big discussion. It's just, we're going to be talking about this next Tuesday night.
I hope to have the budgets. Matt sent pre-budgets late this afternoon, haven't really had a chance to review them. Him and I are going to meet tomorrow via Zoom to go through it on the direction that the board gave the last work session. He will be here next Tuesday. I just wanted to see, is there anything in addition to the budgets, and I should have them for you tomorrow, so you have them a full week before the meeting. Is there anything else you would like me to have ready for you? I know Rob had sent me an email earlier today about financial impacts related to mill rate things, and I'm going to work on that stuff. Is there anything else that people would like to have for that meeting? Okay.
Well, as far as additional information, no.
Yeah.
I think that we have had, you know, a few straggling emails on this issue of financial considerations of capital and operational levies, specifically addressing closure. We've had, I think, all the board kind of weighed in on that at our last regular meeting. And I just want to, while this is being filmed here right now, is there anybody changing from that direction so that we're not going to do another about face and talk about closing any schools within this next referendum?
Not from me.
All right. I'm seeing a lot of shaking of heads, so I think that, you know, that we can go with that. We've done some winnowing of different options. And
Yeah, we'll be bringing in the budgets related to EP Rock, North Hudson, and the middle school. And that was the feedback that we got from the board at the last work session, is to focus our efforts on those 3 buildings at this time. And so that's the most detailed budgets you're going to get on Tuesday next week.
Very good. All right. Otherwise, if there's nothing more on that agenda item, what we have remaining is we need a motion for a closed session.
So moved. Oh, damn it. sorry. Oh. I have to read this? Okay. The board will, I move, I said, make a motion that the board will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.851D to consider strategies for crime detection and prevention. I apologize.
Second.
All right. Carrie beat you by a second there, Rob. But good job, Molly, on the motion. All right. All right. It requires a roll call vote. So Garza? Whitaker?
Aye.
Logland?
Aye.
Johnson? Aye. Bauman? Aye. Powers?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
All right. The ayes have it. We are now in closed session. We will have a break for convenience and reconvene in the library.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we will be adjourning from the closed session. Thank you.